At some point in my life, I had two homes. I was living in two places and absolutely felt like I had two homes. I lived in my house. It was the house where I grew up. It was the room where I grew up. My parents were there. If nothing else, they were the people most familiar to me. The sounds from the neighborhood, that was the soundtrack of my whole life. The smell of fresh cut grass, the fireplace in the winter, the garlic that my father would cook all year, was all very comforting to me. Everything about being there felt like home. I also lived in an apartment in Boston where I was going to school. My clothes were there, my pictures were on the walls, my friends lived with me in the apartment. It's where I slept and studied, where I had parties, and otherwise lived my life most of the time. It was in that apartment that I helped a roommate confront her eating disorder. It was in that apartment that I stayed up all night with another roommate as she was mourning the loss of a boyfriend. Across the street, there was this bakery, and almost every day, the air in the neighborhood smelled like fresh baked bread. And it was in that bakery that they would rejoice in the fact that I would buy their bagels and bring them back to New York every few weeks. That was home. So to ensure my presence in New York, my mother offered to do my laundry. It was really very smart. I would she'd say, come, spend the weekend, I'll do the laundry. So every 2 or 3 weeks, I would pack up my laundry and I would drive to New York. And I would spend the weekend. I did it for years. She's still, really, if she could get me to do that, she would still do that. And every time I did it, every time I drove from Boston to New York, I would get out of the car and I would think, I'm home. And then every time I packed that car up and I drove back to Boston, I'd get out of the car and think, I'm home. Home is where our bones rest. It's where our bodies get what they need. It's where our minds recharge. It's also where we play, where we entertain, where we laugh. And in my home, as maybe you can imagine, there's a lot of laughing. There's also spontaneous dancing. But home is more than that. It's more than a place. It's really that feeling of being home. It's not about necessarily a particular location. There are other places that feel deeply familiar. Places people are happy to see you. Places people are willing to be in relationship with you. Relationships so real, you become a better person for just having been in them. And in that way, community church might be home to you. It is becoming that for me. I'm entering my 5th year here, and I am going to admit that I'm not really warming up to this building, and yet, there's something here that feels like home. You make me a better person. You challenge me to do things I don't always know I can do. And let's admit, sometimes I can't do them. But I'm grateful for the challenge anyway. And I think that you do that with and for each other too. I know that you do. I've seen you do it. I've seen you hold each other up, love each other into health, welcome each other into your lives in ways that are healing and generative. Unitarian Universalism is a really difficult religion We have this idea that inclusion leads to liberation. So we open our doors and our arms and our minds, which is a challenge and sometimes uncomfortable. We have this idea that we can create beloved community through intention and covenant, a process we get closer to but never will perfect. We have this idea that truth isn't permanent, that revelation continues to unfold, and that the most dangerous thing we can be is absolutely sure we're right, which can often be the opposite of what people are looking for in their religious homes, right? Places people can get to hear what they believe is true, and that you know it because God told you so. We don't have that here. We have this idea that the spiritual path is relational. That if there is a kingdom of God, we witness it only when we are in authentic relationship with each other. And we have this wild idea, this grand, life-altering, mind-boggling idea that healing and hope and liberation are all possible if we can learn to put love at the center of everything. As difficult a religion as this is, though, knowing the world is better for it. The world is better because we are here. The world is better because of the work we are doing and our ability to do it. So when I return to this building after a summer out of the pulpit, I admit this space doesn't feel like home, but it doesn't matter, at least not today, because you are my spiritual home. When I see you, when you grab my hand, when you wrap your arms around me, when I look out and see your faces, I know without question that this too is home.